Hey everyone, continuing on with the City of Ember. Last time, we'll recap a little bit. Dune tried to get into the generator room. He was very disappointed when he saw it. He didn't know how it worked. He didn't know what he could do to help the city. And he really realized the city is in worse shape than he thought. We also found out that Dune lives with his father above his shop, the small items shop. And Dune's father told him to really pay attention to every single little detail. Then we switched over to chapter 4, back to Lena. Her granny was looking for something in their apartment, ripping the couch apart, but couldn't find it and didn't remember what it was that she was looking for. However, it was something that her grandfather left, the 7th mayor. And the last part that we just left off on, Lena was delivering a message to Clary in the greenhouses. So here we go. "Well," said Clary. She smiled at Lena, wiped her hands on her already grimy pants, and smiled some more. And finally she said, "You're a messenger." "Yes," said Lena, "and I have a message for you. It's from Arbin Swin. Please add 4 extra crates to my order, 2 of potatoes and 2 of cabbages." And Clary frowned. "Oh, I can't do that," she said. "At least I can send him the cabbages, but only 1 small crate of potatoes." "Why?" asked Lena. "Well, we have a sort of problem with the potatoes." "Well, what is it?" asked Lena. Clary had a habit of answering questions in the briefest possible way. You had to keep asking and asking before she would believe you really wanted to know and weren't just being polite. Then she would explain, and you could see how much she knew and how much she loved her work. "I'll show you," she said. She led the way to the bed where the green leaves were spotted with black. "A new disease. I haven't seen it before. When you dig up the potatoes, they're runny inside instead of hard, and they stink. I'm going to have to throw out all the ones in this bed. And there are only a few beds left that aren't infected." Most people in Ember had potatoes at every meal. Mashed, boiled, stewed, roasted. They had fried potatoes too, in the days before the cooking oil ran out. "Oh, I'd hate it if we couldn't have potatoes anymore," Lena said. "I would too," said Clary. They sat on the edge of the potato bed and talked for a while about Lena's grandmother and the baby, about the trouble Clary was having with the beehives, and about the greenhouse sprinkler system. It hasn't worked right since. And Clary hesitated and glanced sideways at Lena. "For a long time," she said. She didn't want to say, "since your father died," but Lena understood that. She stood up. "I should go," she said. "I have to take Arbin Swin the answer to his message." "All right, well, I hope you'll come again," said Clary. "You can come whenever. You can come anytime." Lena said thank you and turned to go. But just outside the greenhouse door, she heard running footsteps and a strange high sobbing sound. Or rather, she heard sobs and then a wail, sobs and then a shout, and then more sobs getting louder. She looked back toward the rear of the greenhouses, toward the trash heaps. "Clary," she called, "there's something." Clary came out and listened too. "Do you hear it?" "Yeah," said Clary. She frowned. "I'm afraid it's someone who..." She peered toward the crying noise. "Yes, here it comes." Her strong hand gripped Lena's shoulder for a moment. "You better go," she said. "I'll take care of this." "But what is it?" "Never mind, just go on." But Lena wanted to see. Once Clary had walked away, she ducked behind the tool shed, and from there she watched. The noise came closer. Out beyond the trash heaps, a figure appeared. It was a man running and stumbling, his arms flopping. He looked as if he were about to fall, as if he could hardly pick up his feet. In fact, as he came closer, he did fall. He tripped over a hose and crumpled to the ground as if his bones had dissolved. Clary stooped down, and said something to him in a voice too low for Lena to hear. The man was panting. He turned over and sat up, and Lena saw that his face was scratched and his eyes wide open in fright. His sobs had turned into hiccups. She recognized him. It was Sage Merrill, one of the clerks in the supply depot. He was a quiet, long-faced man who always looked worried. Clary helped him to his feet. The two of them came slowly toward the greenhouse, and as they got closer, Lena could hear what the man was saying. He spoke very fast in a weak, trembly voice, hardly stopping for breath. "Was sure I could do it," I said to myself. "Just one step after another, that's all, like one step after another. I mean, I knew it would be dark. I mean, who doesn't know that? But I thought, well, dark can't hurt you. I just keep on going, I thought." He stumbled and sagged against Clary. "Careful," Clary said. They reached the door of the greenhouse, and Clary struggled to open it. Without thinking, Lena darted out behind the tool shed and opened it for her. And Clary shot her a quick frown but said nothing. Sage didn't stop talking. "But then the farther I went, the darker it was. And you can't just keep walking into black dark, can you? It's like a wall in front of you. Oh, I kept turning around to look at the lights of the city because that's all there was for me to see. And then I'd say to myself, don't look back, just keep moving. But I kept tripping and falling. I mean, the ground is rough out there. I scraped my hands." He held up one hand and stared at the red scratches on it, which oozed drops of blood. They got him into Clary's office and sat him down in her chair, and he rambled on. "Well, be brave." Be brave, I said to myself. I kept going and going, but then all of a sudden I thought, I mean, anything could be out here. There could be a pit 1,000 feet deep right in front of me. There could be something that bites. I mean, I've heard stories. Rats as big as garbage bins, and I had to get out of there. So I turned around, and I ran. "Never mind," said Clary. "You're all right now. Lena, get him some water." Lena found a cup and filled it from the sink in the corner. Sage took it with a shaking hand and drank it down. "Well, what were you looking for?" Lena asked. She knew what she would have been looking for if she'd gone out there. She thought about it countless times. Sage stared at her. He seemed to have to puzzle over her question. And finally he said, "Well, I was looking for something that could help us." "Well, what would it be?" "I don't know, like a stairway that leads somewhere maybe, or a building full of, I don't know, useful things." "But you didn't find anything? Or see anything?" Lena asked, disappointed. Nothing. There is nothing out there." His voice became a shout, and his eyes looked wild again. "Or if there is, we can never get to it. Never. I mean, not without a light." He took a long, shaky breath. For a while, he stared at the floor. Then he stood up. "All right, I think I'm all right now. I'll be going." With uncertain steps, he went down the path and out the door. "Well," said Clary, "I'm sorry that happened while you were here. I was afraid you might be scared. That's why I told you to go." But Lena was full of questions, not fear. She had heard tales of people who tried to go out into the unknown regions. She had thought about it herself. In fact, she wondered the same things as Sage. She had imagined making her way out into the dark and coming to a wall in which she would find a door to a tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel would be another city, the city of light that she had dreamed about. All it would take was the courage to walk away from Ember and into the darkness, and then to keep going. It might have been possible if you could carry a light to show the way. But in Ember, there was no such thing as a light you could carry with you. Outside, lights were fixed to their poles or to the roofs of houses. Inside lights were set into the ceiling or had cords that had to be plugged in. Over the course of Ember's history, various clever people had tried to invent a movable light, but all of them had failed. One man had managed to ignite the end of a stick of wood by holding it against the electric burner on his stove. He'd run across the city with the flaming stick, planning to use it to light his journey. But by the time he got to the trash heaps, his torch had gone out. Other people latched on to his idea, and one woman who lived on Deadlock Street, very near the edge of the city, managed to get into the unknown regions with her flaming stick. But the stick burned quickly, and before she could go far, the flames singed in her hands, and she threw it down. Everyone who tried to penetrate the unknown regions had come back within a few hours, their enterprise a failure. Lena and Clary stood by the open door of the greenhouse and watched Sage shuffle towards the city. As he neared the trash heaps, 2 guards had been sitting on the ground, got to their feet. They walked over to Sage, and each of them took hold of one of his arms. "Uh-oh," said Clary. "Those guards are always looking for trouble." "But Sage hasn't broken any law," said Lena. "Doesn't matter. They need to do something. They'll get some fun of scaring him." One of the guards was shaking his finger at Sage and saying something in a voice almost loud enough for Lena to hear. "Poor man," said Clary with a sigh. "He's the 4th one this year." The guards were marching Sage away now, one on each side of him. Sage looked limp and small between him. "What do you think is in the unknown regions, Clary?" Clary stared down at the ground, where the light from the greenhouse was casting long, thin shadows on them both. "I don't know. Nothing, I guess." "And do you think Ember is the only light in the dark world?" Clary sighed. "I don't know," she said. She gave Lena a long look. Her eyes, Lena thought, looked a little sad. They were a deep brown, almost the color of the earth in the garden bed. Clary put a hand in her pocket and drew something out. "Look," she said. In the palm of her hand was a white bean. Something in this seed knows how to make a bean plant. How does it know that? "I don't know," said Lena, staring hard at the flat bean. "I know because it has life in it," said Clary. "But where does life come from? What is life?" Lena could see the words were welling up in Clary now. Her eyes were bright. Her cheeks were rosy. "Take a lamp, for instance. When you plug it in, it comes alive, in a way. It lights up. That's because it's connected to a wire that's connected to the generator, which is making electricity, though don't ask me how. But a bean seed isn't connected to anything, and neither are people. We don't have plugs and wires that connect us to generators. What makes living things go is inside them somehow." Her dark eyebrows drew together over her eyes. "What I mean," she said firmly, "something is going on that we don't understand. They say the builders made the city, but who made the builders? Who made us? I think the answer must be somewhere outside of Ember." "In the unknown regions?" "Maybe, maybe not, I don't know." She brushed her hands together in a time to get back to work way. "Clary," Lena said quickly, "here's what I think." And her heart sped up. She hadn't told this to anyone before. "In my mind, I see another city." And Lena watched to see if Clary was going to laugh at her or smile in that overly kind way. She didn't, so Lena went on. "It isn't like Ember. It's white and gleaming, and the buildings are tall and they sort of sparkle. Everything is bright, not just inside the buildings, but all around them too, even up in the sky. I know it's just my imagination, but it feels real. I think it is real." Clary said, And then she said, "Well, where would such a city be?" "That's what I don't know, or how to get to it. I keep thinking that there's a door somewhere, like maybe out in the unknown regions, a door that leads out of Ember. And then behind the door is a road." Clary just shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know," she said. "Well, I have to get back to work, but here, take this." She handed Lena the bean seed, took a little pot from a shelf, scooped some dirt into it, and handed the pot to Lena too. Stick the bean in here and water it every day, she said. It looks like nothing, like a little white stone, but inside there is life. And that must be a sort of clue, don't you think? If we could just figure it out. Lena took the seed and the pot. Thank you, she said. She wanted to give Clary a hug, but didn't, in case it would embarrass her. Instead, she just said goodbye and raced back toward the city. And now we made it to chapter 5 on Night Street. Granny's mind was getting more and more muddled. Lena would come home in the evenings and find her rifling through the kitchen cupboards, surrounded by cans and jars with their lids off, or tearing the covers off her bed and trying to lift up the mattress with her skinny arms. Oh, it was an important thing, she would say, a thing that was lost. But if you don't know what it was, said Lena, how will you know when you found it? Granny didn't try to answer this question. She just flapped her hands at Lena and said, oh, never mind, never mind, never mind, and kept on searching. These days, Mrs. Murdo spent a great deal of time sitting by their window rather than her own. She would tell Granny she was coming just to keep her company. I don't want her to keep me company, Granny complained to Lena. And Lena said, well, maybe she's lonely, Granny. Let her come. Lena rather liked having Mrs. Murdo around. It was a bit like having a mother there. She wasn't anything like Lena's own mother, who had been a dreamy, absent-minded sort of person. Mrs. Murdo was mother-like in quite a different way. She made sure they all ate a good breakfast in the morning, usually potatoes with mushroom gravy and beet tea. She lined up the vitamin pills by each person's plate and made sure they were swallowed. When Mrs. Murdo was there, shoes got picked up and put away. Spills were wiped off of the furniture, and Poppy always had on clean clothes. Lena could relax when Mrs. Murdo was around. She knew things were taken care of. Every week, Lena, like all the workers between age 12 and age 15, had Thursday off. One Thursday, she was standing in line at the Garden Square Market, hoping to get a bag of turnips for stew that night, and she overheard a startling conversation between two people standing behind her. What I wanted, said one voice, was some paint for my front door. It hasn't been painted for years. It's gray and peeling and horrible. I heard a store over on Night Street had some, and I was hoping for blue. Oh, blue would be nice, said the other voice wistfully. But when I got there, the voice continued, the man said he had no paint. Never had. Disagreeable man. All he had were a few colored pencils. Colored pencils. Lena had not seen colored pencils in any store for ages. Once, she'd had 2 red ones, a blue one, and a brown one, and she used these for her drawing until the stubs were too small to hold. Now, she only had 1 plain pencil left, and it was rapidly growing shorter. She longed to have colored pencils for her pictures of the imaginary city. She had a feeling it was a colorful place, though she didn't know what its colors might be. There were other things, of course, on which her money would be better spent. Granny's only coat was full of holes and coming apart at the seams. But Granny rarely went out, Lena told herself. She was either at home or in her yarn shop, and she didn't really need a new coat, did she? Besides, how much could a few pencils cost? She could probably get a coat for Granny and some pencils. So, that afternoon, she set out for Night Street. She took Poppy with her. Poppy had learned how to ride piggyback, so she wrapped her legs around Lena's waist and gripped Lena's throat with her small, strong fingers. On Budlow Street, people were standing in long lines with their bundles of laundry at the washing station. The washers stirred the clothes in the washing machines with long poles. In days past, the machines themselves had whirled the clothes around, but not one of them worked anymore. Lena turned up Hafter Street, where the 4 street lamps were still out, and a building crew was repairing a partly collapsed roof. Orly Gordon called out to her from high on a ladder, and Lena looked up and waved. Farther on, she passed a woman with bits of rope and string for sale, and a man pulling a cart full of carrots and beets to the grocery store. At the corner, a cluster of little children played catch with a rag ball. The streets were alive with people today. Moving fast, Lena threaded her way among them. But as she went into Otterville Street, she saw something that made her slow down. A man was standing on the steps of the gathering hall, shouting and hollering, and a crowd of people had gathered around him. Lena went closer, and when she saw who it was, her insides gave a lurch. It was Sage Merrill. His arms flailed wildly, and his eyes were stretched wide open. And in a high, rapid voice, he wailed out a stream of words. "I have been to the unknown regions," he cried. "There is nothing there. Did you think something was out there that might save us? Ha! There is only darkness and monsters. Darkness and terrible deep holes. Darkness forever. The rats are the size of houses. The rocks are sharp as knives. The darkness sucks your breath out. No hope for us out there, oh no. No hope, no hope." And he went on like this for a few minutes and then crumpled to the ground. The people watching him, looked at each other and shook their heads. "Gone mad," Lena heard someone say. "Yeah, completely," said someone else. Suddenly, Sage sprang up again and resumed his terrible shouting. The crowd stepped back. Some of them hurried away. A few of them approached Sage, speaking in calm voices. They took him by the arms and led him, still shouting, down the steps. Who dat?" said Poppy in her small, piercing voice. Lena turned away from the miserable spectacle. "Oh, hush, Poppy," she said. "It's a poor, sad man, and he doesn't feel good. We mustn't stare." She headed toward Ninth Street, which ran along Greengate Square. There was a stringy-haired man who sat cross-legged on the ground, playing a flute made out of a drain pipe, and 5 or 6 believers circled him, clapping and singing. "Soon, soon, coming soon," they sang. Who's coming soon? Lena wondered, but she didn't stop to ask. 2 blocks beyond, she came to a store that had no sign in its window. This must be the one, she thought. At first it looked closed. Its window was dark, but the door opened when she pulled on it, and a bell attached to its doorknob clanked. From the back of the room came a black-haired man with big teeth and a long neck. "Yes," he said. Lena recognized him. He was the one who'd given her the message for the mayor on the very first day of work. His name was Hooper. Nope, Looper. That was it. "Do you have pencils for sale?" she asked. It seemed doubtful. The shop's shelves were empty except for a few stacks of unused paper. Poppy squirmed on Lena's back and whimpered a little. "Sometimes," said Looper. Poppy's whimper became a wail. "All right, you can get down," Lena said to her. She set her on the floor where she tottered about unsteadily. "Well, what I'd like to see," said Lena, "are your colored pencils, if you have any." "We have a few," said Looper. "They're somewhat expensive." He smiled, showing his pushy teeth. "Well, could I see them?" said Lena. He went into the back room and returned a moment later, carrying a small box, which he set down on the counter. He took the lid off, and Lena bent forward to look. Inside the box were at least a dozen colored pencils. Red, green, blue, yellow, purple, orange. They had never even been sharpened. Their ends were flat. They had erasers, and Lena's heart gave a few fast beats. "Well, how much are they?" she said. "Probably too much for you," the man said. "Well, probably not," said Lena. "I have a job." Good, the man said, smiling again. "No need to take offense." He picked up the yellow pencil and twirled it between his fingers. Each pencil, he said, $5. $5? For 7, you could buy a coat. It would be an old patched coat, but still warm. That's too much, said Lena, and he shrugged and began to put the lid back on the box. But maybe, Lena's thoughts raced. Let me look at them again. And this will be a good place for us to stop today.